right, so we are now live. All right, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. Welcome to our weekly Wednesday discussion. So, as most of you know, last week we finished our discussion on the book Evolution of Fiqh by Dr. Val Phillips. So now today we are beginning a brand new book. And the book that, and we mentioned last week which book we'd be going over. And so the book that we are going to be going over starting today and moving onward for the next, I would say, 6 to 7 weeks, is the book The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. So today we're not going to go into the actual literature of the book, but more of just have a brief overview of what the book is about, why we are going to be going over this book as Embrace, and also from there, give everyone a few options on how to attain this book so that we'll be able to read through it together, as well as just a brief overview of each week how we're going to go over the book. So the book, The New Jim Crow, this is a book I think many of us have heard of before. It was a New York Times bestseller for a very, very long time. It's a very critically acclaimed book. And essentially, the purpose of this book is to educate the reader on what the author calls the new racial caste system. For those of you, most of us know what a caste is referring to, hence a type of social hierarchy of race. And so this book argues that despite popular belief that now we're living in the time of racial equality, of color blindness, there's no longer this stigma or this systematic inequality of people towards people of color. This book argues to the reader that to this day there still exists this racial caste system within the American criminal justice system, and it argues that we have not actually overcome systematic racism, but instead it just developed into something else, specifically within our criminal justice system. So this book is going to teach us how we are still living in a time where we are not at a time where we have racial equality. There's still much racial inequality within our country that's on a systematic level, specifically within the criminal justice system. It speaks about mass incarceration, disproportionate incarceration between, specifically within the African American community and also the Latino community. Why we have mass incarcerations, the effect of the drug war on this issue. And so it's going to be going through all these different issues which contribute to this refined racial caste system that the author calls it. And so I guess one question would be is why is Embrace, an Islamic organization, going over an un-Islamic book? And so I just want to answer that question with really making 2 or 3 main points. The first point is, in a way, going over this book and educating ourselves on the systematic inequality in our criminal justice system is, in a way, Islamic, and I'll explain why. So I just want to quickly refer to a verse. This is in Surah An-Nisa, verse 135, a verse that I think a lot of us are very familiar with, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after saying, A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين أو الأقربين. So Allah says, O you who have faith, O you who believe, stand firm in standing up for equality and justice and standing up for truth for the sake of Allah, even if it is against yourselves or your parents or your relatives. So Allah says in this verse that it is essentially us as Muslims, it is our responsibility to stand up against injustice, stand up for justice and equality, and to stand up for truth. And the fact of the matter is, we're living in a time where, while due to the current movement going on, the current BLM movement, there's more and more awareness towards the systematic inequality that exists. It's still a very uncomfortable topic for people, and there's still a good amount of our American population that refuses to acknowledge this. Even our own president, for example, just I think a couple days ago, during his interview, he was asked the question: "Is why is there still a disproportionate amount of unarmed Black men being killed by police?" What did our president, our commander in chief, say? I'm not trying to get across a political issue, but I think it's important to mention. He basically said that there was a terrible question and that white people are dying too, and then he said more white people are dying than more white people being killed by police than Black people, which first off is somewhat of a misconception, because while it is true that in terms of pure numbers, more white people are killed by police officers, it's also important to understand that, of course, the reason is there are more white people in America in general. I think around 70% of our population is white. In terms of the rate, Black people are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. Actually, in some studies, 3.5 times more likely. And so, what do I mention this? Even our own president is somewhat not fully confronting this issue, which in terms also affects the perspective of those who follow them, right? So we still have a large percentage. And again, I only mention this not to have a political discussion. Whoever you support it's up to you. Of course, as an Embrace, we're not a political organization, so we're not going to push you to vote for whoever you want to vote for. That's of course up to you. The reason that I mention this is just to highlight that this truth is still not completely acknowledged within our society. And even within the Muslim community, you find a lot of us who don't fully understand this or fully acknowledge this. You will still find within the Muslim community arguments that this is not a real thing, that, systematic racism doesn't exist as much as people are saying. Yes, it's true that the incarceration rate for African American males especially are much higher than other races, but that's just because they commit more crimes and all these other misunderstandings. As Muslims, we are required to stand up for truth and in a way, tell it like it is and stand up against injustice, even if it's against ourselves, even if it's against our own family members, right? And so even if it forces us into comfortable situations and uncomfortable discussions, as Muslims, we are required to stand up against injustice. So this is a very core value within our religion. Hence why it's important for us to speak about issues like this, which are still very prevalent in our communities, right? So that's number one. Number two is, as most of everyone here knows, Embrace is a convert care organization. But like we always say, we are not just convert care, we are also convert empowerment organization. We strive to create leadership and create leaders and active members within the convert community. So that also, of course, includes activism, right? So hence why we want to speak about important issues like this that affect our community in order to educate ourselves on these important issues. So that way we are able to have the tools that we need to address those issues, because we want to be an organization of action, not just an organization of talk, right? So those are really the two main reasons as to why we're going to be going over this book, inshallah ta'ala. And so the next step, I want to kind of share with everyone here. Someone put something in the chat. a little just to kind of really highlight everyone that this is a good source, because I guess the next question would be is how do we know that this is a good book for this issue? How do we know that the author of this book is a trustworthy, verified source? So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to, inshallah ta'ala, together um, kind of learn a little bit about the author and why this is a good book for us to go through. I'm going to go ahead and do screen share. All right. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So we'll just quickly read over this author. This about the author. This is about the author page. This is off the New Jim Crow website. So as I mentioned, the author of this book is Misurella Alexander. She's a highly acclaimed civil rights lawyer, advocate, legal scholar, and of course, author of the New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. As I mentioned, of course, it's a best-selling book that helped transform the national debate on racial and criminal justice in the United States. This book was published in 2010 and it spent nearly 250 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. And even now, it's actually, we look offhanded, it's gaining even more attention as we guys will see later. If you go on Amazon and you try to buy a physical copy, it's basically they're sold out right now. They're out of stock because this book has just gotten so much more attention now due to the current issues that are going on. The book won numerous awards, including the 2011 NAACP Image Award for Best Nonfiction. Alexander has been featured in national radio and television media outlets, MSNBC, NPR, CNN, The Wall Street Journal, Colbert Report, Real Times Bill Maud, and so on and so forth. Over the years, Alexander has taught at a number of universities, including Stanford Law, where she was an associate professor of law and directed the Civil Rights Clinic. In 2005, she won a Soros Justice Fellowship that supported the writing of New Jim Crow and accepted a joint appointment at the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity and Orange College of Law at Ohio State University. Currently, she is visiting professor at the Union Theological Seminary in New York City and a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. Now, I can't find it right here, but it's mentioned in another area that this book was actually used as a reference in actual legal cases. So the information within this book was considered so valuable and relevant that it was actually used in civil and criminal cases. So this just really shows us that this is a very good book written by a very highly accredited author. So from this, we know that we're going to be going into we're going to be learning some very valuable information from a very verified source. So we just want to go over that just to make sure that we are all on the same page. Now, I'm going to do stop share for now, but we're going to go back into the screen share in just a few minutes. But I want to kind of go over just what we plan for the structure of this particular Wednesday discussion. So as most of you know, for our previous book, it was more of a class-like structure where I would talk for about 30 to 40 minutes about the content of the chapter and then open the floor for questions and comments. Now, for this book, I believe that the best and most efficient way for us to really benefit from the book is actually have more of a book club-like structure, to where instead of it's mainly just me talking, it's more of me kind of developing the framework for the conversation, maybe speaking for 20, 25 minutes max, and then from there, have more of an engaged collective discussion, right? And so that, of course, would involve us who are participating to have access to the book and to be reading beforehand for the actual discussion. Now, of course, this does not mean that you can't participate if you don't read the book. Of course, there's still much that you can benefit from without do encourage those who can to try and get this book. So that way we're able to actually read it together and discuss this book together. And so what I want to do real quick is go back to my screen share and just to show you how you can currently obtain this book. All right, so this is right now. This is the book on Amazon. You can get it off Kindle for $9.99, basically $10. And right now, if you want a physical copy, the paperback is actually out of stock. So that just kind of shows you how popular this book is right now, how much more attention it has gotten due to the current events. But of course, you can buy it off Kindle for $10, and you'll automatically have it. Now, they also have a hardcover, I believe, which I can't currently see on here. But I remember the hardcover was about $25, so a little expensive. I don't know if they have that in stock currently right now either. Let me see. So they have other options, but they're also pretty expensive. So right now, I would say one of the best ways to get the book is get like a soft copy via Kindle if you have Kindle. If you want to buy a physical copy, like I said, right now, at least for the paperback, they're currently out of stock. You can still purchase it, but it may take a while for you to get it. Now, Brother Hasib said that there could be a PDF of this book available.
No, it is not. I just checked that. It is just a summary of few pages.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because I was gonna say that I would have that I was gonna say that we're not going to post the PDF yet because we have to make sure that Brother Hasib just said that it's actually not fully available, which is what I thought. Those who aren't talking, can you please mute? Okay. All right. So right now, the best way to attain the book is through Kindle on Amazon for $10. That's the easiest, most efficient way to get it. For a physical copy, it's going to cost a little bit more, and you may have to wait a little while. But if you want to get your own physical copy, I definitely encourage you to get it. And so, like I mentioned, for this particular book, we want to be able to have an active discussion, not just me lecturing. So I heavily encourage everyone here that if you're able to, do try to get the book. That way you're able to actively contribute to the discussion. And if you're not able to buy the book, no problem. Please do plan to join. And at the very least, we're going to highlight the major points within each chapter so that way you'll still be able to benefit and learn from the discussion. Inshallah. Now, the last thing I want to go through, like I mentioned, inshallah, next week we'll actually start the book. So that way, those who are able to have time to actually purchase the book and read beforehand. The last thing I want to do is kind of go over, kind of give a brief overview of how we're going to be going over this book for the next few weeks. So, first of all, there are basically 7 chapters of the book. There's the introduction, and then there's 6 actual chapters. Each chapter is relatively long, but I think to move forward, we're going to do each week, we're going to give an overview of each chapter. So based off of that, we should be able to go through this book in about 7 weeks. Now, like I mentioned, each chapter can be pretty long, around 40 or maybe even 50 pages. So obviously, we're not going to be able to go through every single detail of each chapter in this way. Hence, what my plan is moving forward is I will try to highlight the major points in each chapter. Hence why it's really good for those who can to try and purchase the book themselves. That way they're able to read everything. Even contribute some other points from each chapter that they felt should be mentioned. But obviously, I'm only one guy. I'm only going to be able to pick and read the points that I felt were really important. But perhaps your perspective is different. Perhaps you'll be able to find other important points in the chapter that I was not able to find. So hence why it's really good for us to, as a group, read this book together and discuss it together. So it should take about 7 weeks. On top of that, now this is going to be very good. So on the website, there is a study guide option. And so how this study guide option works is there was somebody who I believe was a colleague of the author who developed this study guide for groups to use. And this study guide essentially, hence the name, gives a guide for group discussion as well as a call to action. So inshallah, the plan is that we're going to utilize that study guide as well. Now, the study guide has not yet been emailed to me. I filled it out and I'm still waiting on receiving the email. But once I receive the email and the free PDF, my plan is to post the study guide within our groups every week. And we will use that study guide to kind of help moderate our conversation, inshallah. So that's really all I have for today in regards to this book. Like I mentioned, we haven't actually went into the book quite yet, just because I want to give everyone an opportunity to actually purchase the book themselves. I've already started reading, and I can already tell you that it's a really good read. And the last thing I really want to share with you guys, which just really kind of help really give us an understanding of what we're going to be learning in this book, is I was watching a lecture from the author today, and in this lecture, she was discussing the content of her book and what basically encouraged her and influenced her to write this book. So as I mentioned previously, the author used to be a civil rights attorney, and she was discussing this experience that she had, which eventually ended up leading her to writing this book, in which a gentleman came inside and he was looking for representation. He wanted to file a lawsuit against the criminal justice department in his neighborhood for police brutality. And
I think there's actually something wrong with him.
she was, sorry about that. And so she was talking to him. He seemed like he was going to be a really good client for her organization to utilize in order to really get a lot of traction, right? He was very well spoken. He was someone who looked good for the camera, and he seemed like he had a really, really strong case. And so she was really hyped up and looking forward to moving forward with him on this, because it really worked. She felt like it was really going to do a lot towards pushing forward her organization's cause, which of course was standing up for the rights of oppressed African Americans. But then he ended up mentioning that he actually was a convicted felon. And when he told her this, at that time, she automatically kind of stopped really listening to him and basically told him that, I'm sorry, I cannot represent you. Because their organization, like many other organizations, don't really have a lot of blockades for those who have a criminal history. But he was still trying to talk to her. He basically was telling her, hold on, don't shut me out just yet. It's true that I was convicted of felon for a drug crime, but I didn't actually do it. I was framed. I was basically, the police officers, he said, they planted drugs on me and my friends, and they forced me into a plea deal. And we'll learn throughout the book, this is unfortunately a very heavily established practice of pressuring people with plea deals into confessing to crimes, even if they didn't actually commit those crimes. And so he said that he was trying to tell her, look, I did not actually do that crime. I'm innocent, but they gave me this plea deal and kind of pressured me into confessing. But I was framed. The police officers, they beat me up and beat my friends up and they planted these drugs on me. But she just kept saying, I'm sorry, sir, I can't represent you because you have this criminal history. You're a felon. I can't represent you. The gentleman ended up becoming furious. And he got up, he grabbed because he was very well organized. He had the names of the police officers involved, he had their badge numbers, he had his case very well organized for her. He grabbed his papers, ripped them up, and he told her to her face, he told her, you're no better than those police officers. And he said, I trusted you. I thought you were going to stand up for my rights. I can't get food stamps. I can't get a job. I have nothing right now. There's no means for me to even take care of myself due to this criminal history that's been put on me. Even though I didn't commit any crime, I was forced into this plea deal, but she was not listening. And long story short, a few months go by, quite a few months go by, and she finds out that those same police officers that he claimed planted drugs on him ended up getting convicted for planting drugs on people. So she ends up finding out that what he said, what he was trying to tell her, was absolutely true. But due to the stigma that those with criminal histories have, and due to the current obstacles that are put in place for those who are convicted of a felon, any felon, caused her to basically take what he was saying and not really listen to him. And it really shook her when all this came to light. So she ended up doing a lot of research, and this research ended up being kind of the main points within her book that we're going to be inshallah reading. And so when I was listening to this story, it really just shook me, right? And stories like that is just a taste of what this book has to offer. So my one last main point I want to make, of course, is, guys, the book that we're going to be reading, we're going to be speaking about very uncomfortable subjects. But as I mentioned previously, it's very important for us as Muslims not to shy away from the truth, even in uncomfortable discussions like this. So, inshallah, I'm definitely looking forward to reading this book with all of you and having some really good, engaged discussion. And on top of that, I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do to address these issues after learning what we learned, inshallah. And with that, I want to go ahead and open the floor to those who are with us. So what are some things that you guys are hoping to get out of this week? What are some things you want to learn from this book? What's something that you want to benefit from? What is something that you want to take away from this book that we're going to read?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Alhamdulillah, Brother Kenneth. Thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless you, and may this upcoming class and book reflection be very beneficial to many of us. For me, I think coming from a perspective where, how do I say this nicely? There's a lot of information that may prove to be invaluable when having that dialogue with people of an opposite narrative as opposed to myself, that I may be able to give them evidences and proofs. And as you've said a couple of times, this book is very valid, that it's even used inside of court cases as evidences to support that which is what it is defending. So in that case, I want to be able to take whatever knowledge that this book may have, not only to further develop it within myself to understand, but it can also be used for relevancy in defending like Black Lives Matter, or even the, against the argument of racism, especially those who are, still practicing that today, whether it's, my family or my community, or people I interact with at work, whatever it may be the case. I think everyone has that one family member, but I also think that we come across it, and how do you defend against it? How do you argue against it? And I want to be able to use facts to further defend that, so that that information can solidify and hopefully develop and change somebody's heart in the future. Then again, who goes to say that somebody who isn't who is, or racist, or doesn't have this narrative, I would imagine they're not using facts or common sense to have racism to begin with. But that's another well, I guess that is the dialogue, that is the topic here. But alhamdulillah, I hope to get out some beneficial knowledge in this, inshallah.
Inshallah, that's wonderful. And based on that, Brother Daniel, that means basically this book is perfect for you, because she mentions in the preface that this book is for those who want to stand up against racial injustice, perhaps don't have the facts and data necessary to have that dialogue and change the minds of those individuals. So this book may be perfect for that. Sister Rashida, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I think that when you were explaining, trying to get Muslims kind of to understand why we're having this conversation, I think what Muslims maybe should do is to just swap out Black with Muslim, right? Because we know that there have been a lot of cases that have been just trumped up. And so maybe that will help to kind of see why, we need to discuss injustices overall, because again, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, as Martin Luther King said.
Oh, absolutely. Very wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Can I say something? Yeah, actually, I'm wondering why we are spending time on this, that to justify that whether this is Islamic or not. I mean, this is a very common sense thing, that this discussion is very relevant. Is very relevant with our aqidah, with our teaching. So really, I don't think we should have two opinions about it. Unfortunately, but what I'm also like to share this one, that as we will learn in this book, Michelle Alexander nicely presented that although that slavery technically ended, but is going on here. Now, keep in mind that when slavery started in this part of world, North America, South America, Central America, almost at the same time frame, 1600, 1700, 1800, we had colonialism on the other side, like in Asia and Africa. And the masters are same. The same group of same people basically control both sides. And as we are struggling here in America, that we still see slavery going on, we have the same pattern over there too. So all those, unfortunately, Muslim countries are technically, they are free or liberated from colonialism, but still we have remote control colonialism, and we have some type of mental slavery going on. So, and one of the I think the push we have among Muslims that Islam is limited to your personal life. That means the only thing you need to be concerned is that how you learn the deen, which just purifies yourself, how you learn how to pray and do your individual ibadah and do your learn Arabic and learn tajweed and all that stuff. But as far as the what's going on in the society, you have nothing to do with it. That's exactly, unfortunately, that's the mindset we have in Muslims. That's why you don't hear those things in Jummah khutbahs about all those issues. We also are very reactive people. So now since we have Black Lives Matter movement here, so now we see that people are talking, the Muslims also started talking about it. But unfortunately, we generally, we boycotted these topics because we somehow, we are enslaved, and this is the, to me, I mean, this is my observation. Obviously, this is a subjective observation and you can disagree with that, but that's the biggest problem. And I'm really glad that we are discussing these topics, and I like to keep this, inshallah, in our future programs also.
That's definitely the plan. Unfortunately, there's many more cases of injustices besides this. So you have, after discussions like this, we need to have more discussions on other topics. And I really want to remember the Hasib on that. This is something that shouldn't have to be pointed out, that doing that stuff like this is Islamic, or standing up against injustice is Islamic. But unfortunately, the fact of the matter is, and you've already kind of highlighted this, in the Muslim community, you'll find a lot of people who don't believe that, who don't seem to understand that. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I remember I saw this video a few weeks ago. I think some of you may have seen it. It was this brother, and he was like basically saying how he doesn't care about Black Lives Matter at all. He thinks it's not worth the time. And here's what he was saying. He was saying, I don't want to say wallahi, because that's what he kept saying, wallahi, wallahi. He was saying, I care more about, basically the fiqh of making wudu, wiping my water over my sock for wudu, than I do about Black Lives Matter. He cares more about, eating seven dates in the morning than I do about Black Lives Matter. He kept talking about basically individual technicalities of individual worship. He was saying that he cares more about those things than he cares about African Americans being oppressed. And this was someone, I think, from a different country. So I think it's important to mention that. But still, he was basically telling what Brother Hassi was saying, that in our Muslim community, you find a lot of people who think Islam is just about individual worship, and that's all you have to worry about. Don't worry about giving activity in society. But that's just not true. Hence why, unfortunately, for the Hezbollah, I think we have to mention sometimes that, yes, discussions like this are Islamic, and then prove why. So that way, us as converts, I think you don't find this stigma as much as a convert community. Wallahu alam. But so that way, us as converts have the tools that we need, when we speak with our brothers and sisters who perhaps may not have a full perspective on the issues going on here. We have the tools that we need to have those discussions with them. Because yes, as Muslims, we do need to care about these issues. All right. Is there anyone else that wanted to share something that they want to, that they hope to get out of this book? I see quite a few people. All right. If not, we can go ahead and close a few minutes early, inshallah. So like I mentioned, next week we'll be starting the the introduction, which is only about 20 pages, so not that bad. As I mentioned previously, you can purchase this book off Amazon for $10 for Kindle. For a hard copy, or it's going to be a little more expensive, and I think Amazon is currently out of stock. If I find any other outlets in which you can purchase the book online besides Amazon, I'll try and share it in the WhatsApp inshallah ta'ala. And with that, we'll go ahead and close. اللهم سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا everyone. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.